he led the team operating FRoot, a worldwide Anycast cluster providing critical internet infrastructure, as one of the 13 global DNS root servers. Anirban Chatterjee has tremendous technical leadership in software development and also spending time in client-facing roles at an executive briefing center. In his current role as product marketing director, he's had the opportunity to drive significant shifts in strategy and address how enterprises or buyers can create new markets for unique products. Anirban and Jim, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Dan, and hopefully you guys can all hear me. Welcome to today's webinar. Jim, I'm really thrilled to be speaking with you today about this topic of AIOps, which I know is top of mind for a lot of people in our audience. Before we get started, I just want to give you a chance to introduce yourself if there's anything you wanted to say about what you do or what your company does.
Sure, thank you, Anirban. I'm Jim Martin. I'm VP of Technology at INOC. INOC, we're an organization that does 24/7 NOC services for people all over the world. We monitor and manage people's networks, as well as being able to do NOC evaluations and improvement analysis. And in my role at INOC, I lead the technology team. So we're involved in everything from the data centers and the cloud presence, the networks, all the monitoring tools, et cetera. And so we've been in the process of doing quite a bit of AIOps work, as well as reworking our whole platform. And we'd love to tell you a little bit about what we've experienced.
Excellent. And as Dan mentioned, I'm Anirban Chatterjee. I do product marketing here at BigPanda. We're a software vendor. We're a SaaS solution that provides a tool for IT ops teams that allows them to avoid outages, shrink MTTR, just operate their incident management processes much more efficiently through AIOps. And AIOps is something that comes up a lot as a term. We're really excited to be able to maybe make that term more real for you, give you some real strategies you can take back to your teams to understand, where it might actually fit in your incident management processes and what are the best ways to get started. But before we get to that, I do want to mention that we do plan to have a little bit of fun today. There are going to be some trivia questions that are Star Wars related, because it's May the 4th, of course. And you can see some of the prizes that we plan to give away for some of these questions. The way it's going to work is, at various points throughout this presentation, we'll stop and I'll ask a Star Wars trivia question. You'll be able to respond in the chat, and whoever is able to hit the enter key first and gives the correct answer first will win the prize that is up for that particular question. And we'll start with the easy ones and we'll ramp up the difficulty as we go. And I think we have a limit one prize per winner rule in effect. So if you win one prize, we're going to let other people win other prizes. But as you can see, we've got some good stuff lined up for you today. So without any further ado, Jim, let's get started. I do want to kind of talk a little bit about where we actually see organizations getting started. Like, what are some of the driving factors, the triggers that cause them to look at AIOps in the first place? And when we talk to customers that come to us, there's three themes that come up quite often. One is they're trying to find ways to use technology to reduce their operating costs because they're spending way too much money on a complicated tool stack or on a team that's just kind of growing and growing out of control. They're trying to improve performance of the applications and services that they're responsible for, and they're trying to make it so that their IT organization becomes a center of innovation as opposed to a cost center, where they're actually able to contribute to the speed of the business as it tries to be more agile. Does that track with what you're seeing in your projects?
Absolutely. Yeah, in our environment, we have seen a consistent challenge in terms of being able to bring many data sources together, drive towards a reduction in time to ticket, a need to increase consistency, reducing the workload on the NOC by adding automation and tools like that. And that's something that has really driven us in the direction of moving towards a new platform, a new infrastructure. We've been doing NOC operations for 20 years now and have developed a tool chain that has worked for us. But over the years, we've found that the circumstances have changed, that there's a lot more cloud these days. There's a lot more monitoring at various levels that we need to bring together. And so that drove us in the direction of looking towards AIOps, as well as sort of just an entire tool chain reevaluation to handle the current set of needs.
Yeah. Would you say that sorry, Jim, go ahead.
No, please.
I was just going to ask, so have you noticed, because I know that I have in some of the conversations we've had with customers, that there can occasionally be a disconnect between the practitioners and the executive leadership in terms of how to actually identify what the important priorities are and where AIOps can help. I know that increasing business velocity is very much an executive phrase, but it's not something that people who are actually on the ground, that's not something they say very often. They're often more focused on leveraging automation or setting up remote IT operations or enabling a DevOps and SRE team to become more productive, which is why we have these two categories of projects or terms that come up in organizations. Do you also see that happening?
Well, I think they're two sides of the same coin. I think
Right.
that the business velocity moves forward when you've reduced the impediments for the folks on the ground. And the way you do that is you try to figure out what is it that's stopping them as they're moving through. And that can be, trying to get, whether it's troubleshooting information or perhaps miscorrelation of events into tickets or whatever are the challenges that they're seeing. And those, by putting in some structure, some intelligence into the system, and also getting best practices and codifying it through the whole system, you can really reduce some of that, which leads to that increased business velocity.
Absolutely. And this all leads, at least in 2021, it's leading more and more teams to AIOps projects. And it's not something that's new. It's been around a little while. And Gartner's actually called it out as a trend. They actually put out a market guide, the Gartner market guide for AIOps platforms. They just refreshed it, I think, earlier this year. And in that guide, they actually point out that organizations will spend, in excess, around $1 million or more, between $900 million. I'm sorry, $1 billion or more, between $900 million and $1.5 billion on AIOps projects, and that's going to be growing on a compound basis annually at 15%. I know that a lot of customers you're working with are seeing that in real terms, right?
Yep. Though I do want to caution folks, so you're absolutely right. There's a huge focus on AIOps. It brings a lot of capabilities to the table. But remember that it's a key piece of a tool chain. So you have to think about your monitoring platforms, your observability platforms. How does that feed into your AIOps infrastructure? And what are you doing there in terms of feeding that into your ticketing system? And then where do you put in your automation? How do you most effectively marry all of these new technologies together to drive that business value you're looking for, or really the velocity on the ground to help people get things done so that you get to cut down that MTTR.
Absolutely, because there's very real pain on the ground today, right? Especially with this growing scale of IT environments that's taking place, the movement towards cloud technologies, the movement towards more composable infrastructure. It's becoming a lot more complicated just to keep the lights on, which is where I think AIOps can help, right?
And there's proliferation of monitoring sources. There's been this shift in the market to having orchestrators for things, whether you are talking about various cloud-based solutions that people have, or vendors are providing their own monitoring tools for their piece of it, but you've got an entire environment to monitor. So you've got to be able to bring it all together in one place, and trying to be able to correlate the events at all different layers of the stack together is something that really can reduce your ticket count and increase your time to resolution.
Absolutely. So let's start talking a little bit about the strategies people can employ. And as I mentioned, we've got 5 that we've identified. Many of them are inspired by the Gartner Market Guide, but we'll have our own experience and unique take on each one of those. And I think we're going to have questions for each one of these that are Star Wars related to help to give you guys opportunities to win some prizes today. But the first one here is be practical and don't be aspirational.
Right.
And one thing that has delayed many IOPS projects in the past has been a tendency to bite off more than the organization can chew. There might be a top-down edict to bring AI and ML into an organization and find ways to enable that technology to help the team, but there's no real clear definition beyond that of what the specific needs are to be addressed. And so you end up adding requirements and adding different ways for it to become complicated, basically. And that ends up pushing deployments out by months and months and perhaps even years. And so one thing that we tell a lot of our customers is pick something that that AI and ML can help with, and that you know is achievable based on the results that other organizations have achieved, and then just build iteratively based on that. Is that also what you've seen?
Yeah. So let me just give people a quick bit of background. As I mentioned, we've been around for a while, and about 18 months ago, we started down this road of revamping our entire platform, our entire tool chain. And where we started was we did work with BigPanda for our AIOps piece of the puzzle. And what we did is we took our existing monitoring platform and we fed it into BigPanda. One of the key things that BigPanda does bring to the table is that it's very quick to get everything integrated. The actual integration between monitoring tools and their platform makes things is relatively quick. And so you can start getting data in. And the way we approached it was to not try to put anything into production right away. We ran everything in parallel to our existing infrastructure. And so we were able to have monitoring that fed into AIOps that then fed into a dev instance of our ticketing system. And we were able to compare what did our legacy platform and what was our new platform, potential new platform, going to produce as results, and use that as a way to start baselining things. And then you could start adding additional monitoring tools in, add additional data sources as you can sort of build up. So really, to the practical to aspirational, you start with just the most basic of pieces, and you start adding additional monitoring sources. You add additional enhancements, enrichments, as we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But you do everything incrementally, getting to the point where you can say, I've now reached equivalent to where I was before, and then moving on to being able to actually improve beyond where you started.
It's probably fair to say that if you start small and just kind of grow and grow over time, it also enables your team to gain the skills they need over time versus having to learn so much at once. You don't end up being this huge behemoth that just falls flat on its face, as we keep seeing over and over again on the screen. Right.
Yes, indeed. And I mean, the truth of it is that you're going to, you also will be able to have the ability to take it and prove to your own teams, as well as your leadership, of the success of the new tooling before you fully rely on it. And that's where the incremental piece really gets you there.
Right. And I think in a lot of ways, if you're able to deploy some of the intelligence early, it actually gives you an opportunity to find out where your other gaps are, right? It exposes, you might not have full visibility into where your problem areas are, and having an AIOps tool that's able to give you early visibility into where the gaps are, it gives you something to focus on for your next step, right?
Indeed. And it also sort of, again, it's all about the incrementalism. It allows you to say, what is it that I need more of? Do I need more data to correlate against? Is it that I need to clean up what I'm monitoring? There are all kinds of specific things that you learn by actually looking at that data as it's coming in. And doing it in a parallel fashion with your existing system allows you to do that in a relatively painless way.
Okay. I think it's now a good time to take a quick break and ask our first trivia question. As I said, we're going to start easy and get progressively harder over time. For this one, we're giving away the Rise of Skywalker Blu-ray. So the most recent Star Wars movie on Blu-ray is what we're giving away this time. And here is the question. And again, the first one to come in on the chat with the correct answer will win this prize. And the question is this: in Star Wars, what do they call the invisible power that binds the galaxy together? As I said, we're starting small.
That was impressive. Yes.
Yeah.
As it scrolls up in the chat window.
Okay. I'm actually trying to figure out how to open the chat. I thought I had it open.
Yeah. So I can take that. It's Matt Tyler. Congratulations.
There we go.
He had correctly identified the Force.
Okay, Matt Tyler, congratulations for winning the Blu-ray for Rise of Skywalker. All right, let's move on to the second strategy, which is choose wisely, domain-centric or domain-agnostic. Now, these are Gartner terms, and if you haven't read the market guide, you might not be familiar with them. But the difference is basically this. If I were to put it into a nutshell, the domain-centric AIOps tools are basically solutions that are specific to a particular domain, obviously. So network monitoring or application monitoring, infrastructure monitoring, cloud monitoring. solutions that exist in those spheres, and then they add AIOps capabilities to what they're already doing in the monitoring space, are like probably the initial AIOps tools that are domain centric. So in the application space, for example, you can take AppDynamics as an example of an APM tool that is a domain centric AIOps tool because they exist in APM, but they add a lot of AI and ML intelligence to their solution to make APM work better. That's a domain centric tool. Now, a domain agnostic tool is something that works across domains. So there's a bunch of other solutions that will actually look across different domains and kind of pull in data from all those different domains together and combine them and get insights from that. And what BigPanda does is a subset of that called event correlation and automation. And what we're actually doing is we're taking alerts from multiple domains across the IT landscape, like APM, like network, like infrastructure, like cloud, and we're correlating that together along with data about changes happening in your environment, topology shifts for resources happening in your environment. We use that to figure out what's actually happening and package up incidents for you if some actual situation is taking place in your environment that your IT ops team needs to know about. So all of that gets packaged together into one spot. So that's an example of a domain agnostic tool. And I think what Gartner would recommend, and I think what they have recommended in the guide, is that domain-centric solutions are good for specific use cases. So if you identify a specific use case that is in the APM world, for example, then a domain-centric, APM-centric tool would be appropriate for that. But if you also have broader use cases where you need to be able to identify insights across a wide variety of IT technologies, then domain-agnostic tools would be a better fit. So Jim, how do you react to the categorization of domain agnostic versus centric?
So I actually think that both have some real value to bring to the table. Where we see it in our environment is that we see, for example, in the unified communications world, you're trying to focus on details of video calls and phone calls and that sort of thing. And you want to know very specific details about that. Similarly, on the other end of the scale, you've got optical gear, where you're worried about very specific error rates, the loss on the link, all those sorts of details, how hot the signal is, that are really very domain specific. And having intelligence in the tools to be able to generate the right alarm for that specific domain is really useful, because trying to build an Uber tool that will understand that all isn't realistic. That said, the flip side of that is something the domain agnostic, like BigPanda is extremely useful for taking those events and being able to correlate across them. And the way I look at this is, think of, you're saying, okay, I've got loss on I'm having lousy audio quality on my phone call. But if that translates into loss on the link down at a lower layer, you don't need to worry about the details at the phone level. You need to go figure out why that link has loss, and that's where the combination of the intelligence at the domain-centric intelligence coupled with the domain agnostic allows you to really focus on where the honest problem is.
Right.
The other piece of that is that the domain agnostic really helps you bring things together. So as I was mentioning a moment ago, the industry is really driving towards lots of tools that are specific to individual vendors' platforms or specific types, APM all the way through element management, maybe your cloud monitoring capabilities, all of those being brought together. And taking those all and bringing them directly from monitoring into your ticketing system tends to lead to an enormous number of tickets, which translates to lots of staff time dealing with all those tickets and trying to understand, is this the same issue or is this a separate issue? Being able to bring it together through an AIOps platform really allows you to focus on what the root cause of the problem is and drive towards a quicker resolution.
Absolutely. As you were talking, two things kind of occurred to me. The first is that no matter which one you deploy first, domain-centric or domain-agnostic, there's a real potential for domain-centric solutions to actually make the domain-agnostic tools work better, right? Because you're actually giving higher quality alerts on the domain-centric side, because of the intelligence built into the tool that understands what it's actually looking at, you're not flooding domain-agnostic AIOps solutions with alerts that might not mean anything. You're actually giving alerts that actually make sense, and that provides more intelligence upfront to the domain-agnostic tool that now has to correlate that data with data from other domains, right? So there's actually an added benefit that builds upon itself the more intelligence you build into the network, because the domain-agnostic tools benefit from all of the intelligence from all the different parts, all the different domains that are involved in an incident that feed into it, right?
And that's actually brings up a key point that I wasn't super clear on when I first started doing this, which was really you've got to be really clear in your mind and say that an AIOps platform, the domain agnostic AIOps platform like BigPanda, it's not a monitoring tool. It's going to take useful alarms and alerts that are coming from your monitoring tools and bring them together and do the appropriate correlation so that you have a number of alerts that all drive towards a single incident that you can go work. But don't confuse that correlation tool, that mechanism that brings the alarms together and identifies the incident with actual monitoring. And that's where a domain-centric tool that actually understands the domain and knows what the right thing is to alarm on is critical to the overall tool chain.
Right. And I think also there's a lot of value for domain-centric tools in the actual deep investigation of an incident. When you're on the IT ops team and you just want to know what's on fire and figure out, how to triage an incident and figure out who needs to go work on it, then a domain-agnostic tool that has full visibility across the environment and knows, where the heat is hottest, for lack of a better phrase, that's really helpful to them. But then when you actually have localized the issue to a network problem, that's when the domain-centric network monitoring tool can actually help the network engineer figure out how to solve it, right?
Absolutely.
All right, so let's ask our second Star Wars trivia question. And for this one, we're giving away the three-dimensional Death Star light that you saw on the chart a few minutes ago. And the question is this. And again, the first one to come in on the chat wins this. How old is Yoda when he dies? I'm seeing a lot of different numbers coming in the chat. I haven't seen. You need to get close.
There is certainly one close. Okay, there you go.
Mark Beagler came in first with 900. I was looking for something in the 900 range.
Yep.
So Mark, you are the winner of the 3D Death Star light. Congratulations. All right, let's move on to the third strategy, which is using enrichments. And this is one, Jim, that I know you felt very strongly about including. Yeah. I'll let you lead this off.
Absolutely. So getting things hooked up so that your alarming system and monitoring systems are feeding alarms into your AIOps platform, that can go quickly. But what you begin to find as you are then having an alarm stream go through and you're building your correlation patterns, and the ML is there running on those correlation to help you build those correlation patterns, is that sometimes the amount of data that is in the alarms itself isn't really sufficient to get that really fine-tuned set of tickets out the far end, set of incidents on the far end. And the way that you can really substantially improve that is to bring in your CMDB. And so I'm sure most of you are familiar with the CMDB, but the CMDB brings you lots of data about elements within your network, the circuit IDs associated with ports, all of that kind of information. And when you can take the alarm data and then enrich it with the data coming out of your CMDB, suddenly the machine learning has more to chew on. You have lots more ability to have more sophisticated correlation patterns, because it's not just whatever happens to be spit out by your monitoring tool. And bringing those two together can take this to a substantially higher level. In fact, that's something that we're working on right now within our environment, is adding all of that enrichment to be able to refine the correlation so that we can help our knockout by making sure that we've got just the right number of tickets being created for them to deal with.
Yeah, I think enrichments, to your point, they're kind of the unsung hero of the entire event correlation process, right? I think when you just get alerts coming in from a variety of different domains, it can be difficult to correlate them together. You can use timestamps, but that's not very effective a lot of the time. You can just use where they came from, but then you'll miss alerts that came from other places that happen to be related. Unless you're able to add enrichments to each one of those alerts that give you the food you need to understand that these two are actually connected together, you're not going to be able to do any effective noise reduction. And so one of the most important technologies that we use in BigPanda is really, really effective enrichments that are easy to deploy, because if they're not easy to deploy, you're not going to deploy them, right? So they have to be easy to deploy, and they have to actually add value to every single alert, and they have to actually be used in the correlation. So if you're not doing all of those things, you're not going to be able to benefit from the noise reduction. You'll get context data when you open an alert. You might have enrichments populated on the side of it that might be related to it, and that's good. But unless you're using that information to actually drive the correlation engine, you're not going to realize the noise reduction benefits, and you're not going to drive down MTTR. So that's one of the things that we really, really focus on a lot here, is making sure that the enrichments are really effective and easy to deploy so that customers actually use them and realize the benefits from them.
Indeed. The other thing I want to point out here is that you almost definitely have folks within your environment right now that understand the characteristics of your environment, that are dealing with looking at the tickets today, that are looking at the alarms out of the alarming system today, and they have the tribal knowledge, the experience with your environment. The process of tuning an AIOps tool really is, think of it as retasking that human. That human may have originally been focused on handling the alarms themselves and dealing with the ticketing. Really, what you want to have them shift into a role of configuration. They now can look at the correlation patterns, and obviously the AI is going to try to give you a first shot at recommendations on how to tune it, but your staff, they're going to know the details of your environment, that you use this piece of the host name to identify which data center it's in, or whatever the details are about your environment. And you want to retest that human and bring them to be one of the partners in deploying these tools, so that you can take the knowledge that they've gained and codify that in your correlation patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that we focus on as well. I think there's some AIOps solutions that will kind of hide the AI, hide the ML, and just make it like a black box that you can't really configure. And we've really tried to take the opposite approach and put the IT ops team in the driver's seat at all times. That doesn't mean we're giving them more work to do. What we actually are trying to do is make it so that we're proactively suggesting, here are some correlation patterns that you don't have in your system today that might actually help you cut more noise out of the system. But take a look at them, try them out, test them, tune them, and only put them into production when you feel confident in them. And I think that level of confidence in an AI is extremely important, because if the people who are managing the IT ops landscape on a day in, day out basis are not confident in the tooling they're using, and they're not able to believe in the fact that the AI and the ML is going to do the right thing for them, they're never going to turn it on. And if you don't turn it on, then there was no point in deploying it in the first place. And so we've tried really hard to make the technology approachable and controllable, so that you can actually define what enrichments you want to use, define how those enrichments are used, but you're still getting the benefit of the AI and ML in proactively suggesting how different configurations may actually get you better results. And I think that's one of the key parts of the solution.
I very much agree with you there. For us, it's twofold. First, it's a confidence level that we know that it's not a black box. We know what's going to happen, and we can control what's going to happen. It's not that that there is some mysterious set of algorithms that we're not familiar with that are going to be making the decisions on our business critical applications, but also that it allows us to benefit from the AI without having to give up the control to it. And frankly, to maintain from a security perspective, from an information security perspective, I need to, we are ISO 27K certified. And so as part of that, we need to maintain change management over all of our critical infrastructure. If it was changing itself all the time, I wouldn't be able to claim that. But the mechanism of making suggestions based upon the ML that we can then verify, run through our change management process, and then deploy allows us to make sure that we are responsibly deploying the new technology.
Okay, I do want to pause for a second and point out that we are paying attention to the question answer panel. So if you have questions as we're discussing things here, feel free to ask them. If they seem really relevant to the current discussion, I'll try to bring them in organically. If not, we'll try to get to them at the very end of the broadcast, because we do want to make sure that as you're thinking of questions, we're trying to answer those for you. I'm really glad you brought up change management, because I did want to bring up some of the sources of enrichments that are useful. And it's not just monitoring sources, right? There's other sources of information that are extremely important and critical to any incident management process. One is changes, to your point, because I think, easily like 80–90% of issues or incidents that happen in an IT ops environment happen because somebody changed something. Somebody pushed a code update, somebody changed a router configuration, somebody tripped over a cable, somebody tried to bury a fence post and to cut a fiber line. I mean, these kinds of things happen, right? Somebody changed something. And then the other is topology changes, right? Like if applications or services or VMs or other resources move from one system to another or one cloud data center to another, that can also precipitate issues and that cause incidents, right?
Absolutely. We find, though, that's where the reality and the theory diverge a little bit. In a perfect world, you get notified, you go through change management on everything, and you're notified of everything. But people sometimes do go and exceed their change windows or forget to mention to you about the change windows, and that's where having the monitoring, be able to bring that to your attention, allows you to be able to say that this is that there's something that has been gone through change management, or if there's something that's an exception where you've got to drive constant improvement so that you can make sure that you change your procedures so that they do in fact bring things back into change management.
Yeah, so I think one thing that I would suggest if you're evaluating AIOps solutions is make sure that they work with your data sources that you have, because you shouldn't have to give up any existing tooling you have in your environment to make an AIOps solution work. And don't just look at monitoring, look also at where your changes are being tracked, look also where your topology of your hybrid infrastructure is also being tracked, and that the solution can actually pull in data from all of those sources, not just observability, because that's all going to have an additive benefit to helping you optimize incident management. All right.
But that totally goes back to where we were talking earlier about sort of that iterative approach. You can start with the most basic flow of data through the tool chain, but then you can iteratively add better correlation patterns, more data sources, more things to correlate against. All of this allows you to keep tuning it and making it better. But that it allows you to avoid the need to have sort of a big bang where you've got to design this whole system and make it all go live day one. You can incrementally improve it and say, the next piece of the puzzle that I need to work on is my monitoring platform or the way that the automation works within my ticketing system or whatever. But you can work your way through it incrementally.
Yeah, exactly. There's absolutely no reason to get all 25 of your integrations going on day one. You can start with the 5 that are most important and just add them on over time. Just make sure that you're choosing partners that are able to grow with you and support any new integrations that you might have in the future. I think that's where AIOps can really help people. All right, let's go to our third trivia question. And for this one, we're actually giving away the Yoda Lego set that you saw earlier. It's actually, we actually have one at home. It's about that tall. It's really cool. And the head articulates and it holds the little ball. It's really nice. So the question is this: what was the job that Finn told Han Solo that he had at Starkiller Base? And I'm watching the chat to see who gets the correct answer first. What was the job that Finn told Han he had at Starkiller Base? Okay, Daryl Beard came in with janitor. Real quick, that is correct. So Daryl, you are the winner of the Yoda Lego set. Congratulations.
Congrats.
I think he actually said sanitation in the movie, but I'll give you janitor. That's close enough. All right, so let's go to the fourth strategy for AIOps, which is automating processes. And Jim, I know you feel passionately about this one. So
I do indeed. I do indeed. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we've been working through rebuilding this entire tool chain. And one of the things that we decided from day one was that we were going to try to put in as much automation as possible, because if you looked at sort of the improvements that we could make, some of them were done right out of the gate. Your time to ticket goes down to milliseconds when you're doing your ticketing entirely by an AIOps platform. But then you start, but that's only one piece of your MTTR. And so what else can we do to ensure both that we're trying to get to resolution as quickly as possible, as well as making sure that we're solving the same problem the same way every time. So we have consistency in the way that we approach problems. And so we started, but our legacy approach had been that we had run books that were written in wikis that when this kind of a event occurs, these are the steps you go through to do it. Now we've built workflows into our ticketing system. So when a set of alarms comes in, that triggers workflows that we drive our NOC staff through the steps that they need to do to work through the issue to provide that consistency. But then we took it one step further and we added runbook automation. So where we began with that was, if the first step in that troubleshooting guide that you're going to go through is log into the box and grab this information and figure this out, is that we built in some capabilities where we're now, from our ticketing system, we're initiating an outbound connection to the client device. We're issuing that show command that gets us the details of that BGP session or whatever you need for to troubleshoot, and puts that into the ticket, so that when it does make it to a human, they begin to work on it, they've got all the information they need at their fingertips. And we've built up over time a library of these various mechanisms to go get information based upon specific device types and specific types of alarms. And that's all driving towards that aspirational goal of automated remediation. And I can give you an example that we've got a client that has a large wireless deployment, and all of the access points are PoE powered. And currently, when alarms come in for these, and we have individual APs go unreachable, there's a runbook process where people go in, check various statistics, various statuses, and if all the right conditions are met, they'll go and disable the PoE on the port, thus dropping power to the access point and re-enabling it, and that's the resolution. So we're starting we would start with going and grabbing that initial data to help the person make the decision, make it more quickly. But then the next step would be to add a button in the ticket that says go ahead and initiate the PoE, turn off and turn back on. And ultimately our goal, and we're not there yet, is to then go to where if you've identified all the set of criteria, you could then go and do that power reset automatically. And again, so much of this is to drive the workload on the knockdown, to increase the speed of resolution for the clients. But we need to do it in a stepwise, careful way, because we certainly don't want to be shutting things down that are live. And so that's where walk before you run is just a critical piece throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for taking us through that. I'm sure a lot of people on the call today are looking for ways to get started with automation, and having your story of how you actually did it step by step, I think is really useful for everyone to hear. I certainly liked hearing that. One thing that definitely jumped out at me that I think everyone can take away from this is that it's not just about automating tasks that humans used to do. It's making things consistent and repeatable and error-free. Because I mean, I think, everyone knows if you're under the gun and you're opening incident after incident after incident, your tickets aren't going to, you're going to miss something every so often. You're going to miss setting a particular setting. You're going to miss copy pasting one particular piece of data into the tool. You're going to miss copying the runbook into the ticket, things like that. And automating the grunt work, the things that are just steps to follow, so that the machine takes care of that and allows you to focus on actually solving the problem, actually removes a huge mental load from the entire team and allows them to focus on what they do best, right?
Not only that, but it improves their quality of life, because instead of spending all their time doing grunt work, they're doing intellectually stimulating, challenging work, and so that improves their likelihood to want to stick around and help and remain part of your team, and really provide great service for the clients.
Yeah, no, you led exactly my second point, which is that there's often, not always, but often there's this fear of like automation is going to take away my job, or like if AI comes in, it could basically do my entire job for me, and they're not going to need me anymore. That might have been true for industries that are stagnant and not innovating, but that I honestly have never seen that as being true in IT, where things are changing so quickly, and the environments are becoming so much more dynamic on an almost quarterly basis, that there's always going to be work for IT people to do if they're suddenly freed up from doing, like, the least fun parts of the job, right?
Mm-hmm. Indeed, and that's where earlier I was mentioning sort of retasking the human. Today we have on our legacy system, we have folks that we call our alarm handlers, that look at the alarm stream and actually cut the individual tickets in a manual fashion, but they've got lots of experience at it. And those same people we now have working to tune the correlation patterns, because they understand all the nuances of how the alarms look and what that really means. And so basically you're taking someone from doing menial work and giving them interesting work to do, and improves that quality of life.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Let's jump to our fourth Star Wars question, and they're starting to get a little bit harder now. And again, the first person to come in on the chat with the correct answer will win the Star Wars Blu-ray bundle, which is actually the last three, the most recent trilogy of Star Wars movies: The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker, all on Blu-ray. Or at your option, we can do them digitally as well. If you don't have a Blu-ray player or just don't want discs anymore, we'll give you a credit so you can acquire digital copies of those movies as well. So the question is this: what did R2-D2 realize about C-3PO when they first met? What did R2-D2 realize about C-3PO when they first met? And I'm watching the chat. They are robots. That is true, but I don't think that's the answer I was looking for.
These aren't right, but they're interesting.
I love the answers. I actually did not know this when I first read the answer to this question. So this will surprise a few people.
Any other guesses?
Maybe we found one that's too hard for the audience. I find that difficult to believe.
Well, we do have someone answered it in the Q&A instead of the chat.
Aha. Let me see. I don't see the answer that I was looking for.
Nope. Yeah, perhaps, what was he wearing?
I think that's something that we realized, but not something that they realized.
There we go.
He was naked.
Yep.
Thank you, Angeliki. The first thing R2 realized about C-3PO was that he was naked. And again, this is not something that I remembered, but apparently this is what the first thing that I realized was. So you are the lucky winner of the Star Wars Blu-ray bundle. Congratulations. Now let's move on to the fifth of 5 AIOps challenge, AIOps strategies, and that is driving continuous insights. And this is one that comes up quite often early in these projects that we get involved in, because oftentimes when we ask a customer like what their current KPIs are, many of them don't even know what their current MTTR is. They're not measuring it. So I think measuring what the current performance of your IT management processes is extremely important, because then you can actually define success. You can say, okay, here's how I'm performing now, here's how I'd like to perform in the future, and you can work towards closing that delta. And there's also a continuous process improvement that happens when you're able to actually instrument every step in the incident management process using these AIOps tools to actually look at every single stage, from discovering the incident to actually doing root cause analysis to kicking off remediation, understanding how long all those things take, where the delays are, where the gaps are. It actually gives you areas to focus on to actually make the processes work more efficiently and better for the team. So Jim, I know you've got strong opinions on this as well, since you work with a lot of NOCs.
Yeah, my focus is more focused on how to work with your NOC. So you put in these tools and you say, here, we've got this shiny new tool. This is going to make your life better. But it's really critical to keep a tight integration with the folks who are actually dealing with this to identify, is it really helping, or is this actually making more work? Perhaps you've got correlation patterns that need to be updated, that you need to tune better, that you need more enrichment, whatever. But you need to work closely with your NOC to understand what the impact is on them, because the truth is that if you're not winning them over, the rest of the system doesn't really matter all that much. So in my experience, work with the NOC, identify what their pain points are in an iterative process, try to address whatever pain points, or if there are things that are really helping out, let's make sure you emphasize those. But then figure out what is it that the next steps are that are going to bring you the most value. Do you need to bring in more monitoring tools? Do you need to enhance your CMDB? What is it that you need to do to bring the most value into producing the best tooling and the best set of inputs for the folks on the ground to be able to work through the issues and resolve the issues as quickly as possible?
Absolutely. One thing that I would add to that is there's often a desire to actually demonstrate what success looks like to the executive stakeholder team, especially when you're trying to get an AIOps project funded. It's not often easy to articulate why you need to approve the project and how you demonstrate success after you've deployed it. And so having these measurements at every single step in the chain, obviously your NOC is happy because you're able to measure and demonstrate their success. But the entire chain of people involved in every single incident that comes in and has to be handled, you can show how they're performing better too by improving the processes that they use every day. So being able to demonstrate success to key stakeholders is a really helpful byproduct of deploying an end-to-end AIOps tool, because that actually gives you the ability to get visibility that you did not have before into how well your incident management processes are actually functioning. Right, Jim?
Indeed.
Yeah. So let's go to our final question, our trivia question. And for this one, we're giving away the Millennium Falcon Lego set that you saw earlier in the presentation. And the question, once again, I'm looking into the chat for the first correct answer. The question is this: what was the diameter of the Death Star? What was the diameter of the Death Star? It's a little bit bigger than 50 meters. I'd like for someone to get a little bit closer. Okay, Jack Paris, 120 kilometers. That is the correct answer. Congratulations, Jack. You win the Millennium Falcon Lego set.
Awesome.
All right.
Congratulations. Yeah.
So once again, we do have a little bit of time left over for questions. So if you have any questions that you haven't typed into the Q&A panel, please go ahead and do so now. I'm going to start looking through there. There is one question that we can get out, that we can handle right off the bat. Are you able to test correlation? This is from Ram Malhotra. Are you able to test correlation based on known past outages where teams have already determined a root cause? So basically doing the analysis on historical data sets to tune the AI to what was actually determined to be the known root cause. Okay, so what we actually do is we look at the alerts, and this is BigPanda, and Jim, you might have a broader answer to this. But what we do at BigPanda is we'll actually look at all of the alerts coming in, and we'll use the alerts along with the enrichments to each alert to identify patterns, actual commonalities between groups of alerts that, based on our experience and based on watching the IT ops team work, we believe to be incidents that should be correlated or alerts that should be correlated together. We'll suggest correlation patterns based on that learned activity and learned behavior that is taking place over time in the system. So if there are incidents coming in that match, that seem to be correlated together, but aren't being properly matched together by an existing correlation pattern, we'll actually suggest new correlation patterns to the user so that they can test them and tune them and turn them on to catch any new incidents that might be coming in that might not have been caught by prior correlation patterns. And Jim, I don't know if you had anything to add on this.
I do actually. So we've done this and we're continuing to do it now. So one of the things I suggested earlier was basically running things in parallel to your existing workflows. So what we were able to do was say, we had our existing monitoring workflow in place, and then we ran all of the AIOps based solution system, ran through the AIOps based system to compare the output. And when they differed, we used that to help tune those correlation patterns. But one of the really nice features that BigPanda has, that now I do sound like a shill, but one of the nice features that BigPanda has is the ability to take alarm data that's come in, and you can say, I have this proposed new correlation pattern. What incidents would that create if I made this change to the correlation pattern? And so, if you've got if you have a miscorrelation take place, and you say, well, I think I could fix that if I just brought in this additional piece of data into the correlation pattern, you can try that and rerun that simulation through the data that's come in. And if that then correlates correctly, yep, that's a good thing. Let's go ahead and go through change management and get that put into production. Or, that didn't work. I got to try something different. But you can do that all on historical data that's come in. Now, the one thing that I have not, actually, oddly enough, we're talking to BigPanda support on right now is it possible to load older alarms or so that you could then rerun enrichment and rerun some correlation pattern testing based upon loaded data rather than just waiting for events to happen, or if you didn't happen to have that set of events come in. But that kind of thing is constantly being developed.
Right. And it all goes back to the whole idea of trusting the AI, right? We talked about this earlier on in the broadcast, right? The fact that if the AI and the ML is just a switch that you turn on and off, and you don't really understand what it's doing or how it works, and you can't adjust it over time, you're never going to trust it. And so one thing that is really important for AIOps solutions that you evaluate is, are you actually able to build trust with it over time by tuning how it works and encoding your domain knowledge and your there's a common word that is escapes right now, the tribal knowledge that actually present in the organization, to actually leverage that in the actual definition of how the tool is actually working for you. If you're able to leverage those things, then you're able to build trust that much quicker, and you're able to use the benefits of the AIOps solution that much faster. All right, I think we're coming up on the top of the hour here. Thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm going to throw it back to Dan.
Gentlemen, thank you for a great presentation. I actually have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask.
Okay, great.
So from an AIOps perspective, especially if there are folks that are new to this, what are some good test cases that they should use to sort of validate this is probably one question. And the second question, for their own career development, how can they leverage what they're doing with AIOps how can they articulate that to the business in terms of business productivity, improvement, cost savings? What are some of the things that they can, in their own mindset, leverage for their own career development on both ends?
So on the test cases, I think I hit on it a few times, is that I really strongly believe in that parallel alarm stream. If you've got because what you have is you've got your existing process that'll do the correlation of the alarms down to a ticket that people will work. And if you find that that your AIOps platform is correlating to the same thing, then you know that you're able to say that that is going to get you the same result or better result and in a faster at a faster speed than having a human do correlation. And also what we're finding in a lot of our client environments is that people have lots of different alarm streams coming in, but they're all cutting into individual tickets, and then they're having to correlate within the ticketing system. And so we're able to, you're able to see that clear reduction in ticket load, and reduction in ticket load 100% translates into reduction in cost and load on your staff. And Nirban, do you want to touch on the other one?
Yeah. So in terms of like, the career, I think was the question, right, Dan? Like what are next steps if I want to, focus more on this as I grow my career? So one thing that, we've tried really hard to do is to make it so you don't have to hire a whole bunch of data scientists to get AI and ML to work in your organization. Many have tried that. It doesn't often work because these data scientists don't really understand IT ops the same way that the people in this broadcast do, right? So if your career is in IT ops and you're able to add on a competency in understanding how data science works, understanding how ML works to some degree, not that you can actually go out and write your own ML algorithm, but that you understand, the basic functions of ML and what actually drives good performance out of ML, some basic training in that regard, that's going to make it a lot easier when you're evaluating AIOps solutions, because you're able to get more out of them, because you're able to understand what's actually happening under the covers. And when you actually tune the performance of different correlation patterns or different integrations or different enrichments, you're able to pick and choose the elements that are going to give you the most bang for your buck, versus if you don't have that level of background, you might be doing a bit more trial and error. It might take you a little bit longer to get there. So there's definitely opportunity, I would say, and just being more literate in how broader data analytics works and how to leverage to specifically benefit the environment that you find yourself operating in, because every environment is a little bit different. It's almost like a snowflake, right? So understanding how your environment will specifically benefit from AI and ML will be immensely helpful as you grow your career.
Thank you. And one other question. How would you say that AIOps is changing IT culture for the better?
It absolutely is shifting the way it's matching the expectations of the industry, in the sense that the industry is expecting very short time to ticket, very short time to incident resolution, because at this point, the network operating is just table stakes. Everything's got to work all the time. Everybody depends on it. Businesses depend on it. And so seconds count. Being able to automate the process of identification of issues, and correlating them appropriately, and having your team focus on the root cause of the issue as quickly as possible, fundamentally changes the way that the operations take place, and can meet the needs of a modern environment.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I would add that the prevalence and growth of AI solutions is actually proof that the culture in IT is already changing. I mean, I think we all remember it wasn't that long ago that IT was considered a cost center, and an area where you were constantly trying to pull dollars out and try to spend less and try to invest less, because it was just a sink of money that wasn't adding any business value. And those days are far behind us. And now we're looking more and more often at IT as an innovation center, a place where new, exciting things can happen that actually grow the business. And so when you have that kind of an environment, it becomes that much easier to justify pointing more technology at that area of the business to make it work even better and be even more agile and provide even more value to the business. And so I think the growth of AIOps is just another example of how IT has become so important that more and more investments are pouring into it rather than the other way around.
That's great. Thank you for both those examples. And it just leads me to one last question that you touched on, which I think is a wonderful segue. So when we talk about innovation, there are a lot of folks that hear that term and they're not sure where to start. So how can they leverage this to really help the organization innovate, launch new services? Do you have any examples that can help the attendees help sort of visualize in their own minds, by doing this, how they can brighten the days for the enterprise, or really sort of innovate? Any concrete examples that you've seen kind of in your careers?
Jim, I don't know if you have a specific example from INOC that.
I was going to say, really, it was the main one that that I was using as an example of that innovation was that situation with the wireless APs. That's where you can have sort of the ability to stepwise use capabilities of the tool set to reduce the workload on staff, to increase your time, or rather decrease your time to resolution, and really just make the jobs of everybody else involved a little bit better and a little bit easier. And so that's the key innovation that AIOps brings into it. It also brings in the ability to additively bring in additional monitoring sources. So you no longer have to focus on, does SolarWinds solve all of my problems for me, or do I need to focus on my APM? You can have all of the pieces that all can feed in, and all of those things can drive the process of incident management, which can allow you to get to your root cause that much sooner.
Yeah, you talk about innovation. That two customers of ours that come to mind when you brought that question up are Hulu and PlayStation Network, which are both customers that have very much grown their business, especially in the last year that we've had, where we're spending more time watching streaming video online, more time playing online video games. They saw an incredible amount of growth in both their businesses, and they actually used AIOps solutions to help them scale their team and safeguard their most valuable online assets while growing, while adding customers, and while being almost a, I don't want to say critical service, but certainly a very important service for a lot of normals like you and me out there in the world just trying to get by last year. I think it was really, really useful to have those things available to us. So there's a tremendous amount of opportunity that made itself visible last year, and it continues into 2021 and beyond. And there's a lot of opportunity for AIOps to add to that innovation.
Well, gentlemen, I appreciate your time. I know there's one other question from an audience member, but I will, due to time, I will email the audience member and you too, so the three of you can converse on this directly after the session. Thank you to INOC and BigPanda for their sponsorship. Thank you for everyone joining us. We had folks from around the country and some folks from around the world that joined us today. We appreciate everyone being a part of this. For those of you that participated, by tomorrow we'll have a certificate for continuing education credits in your inbox. Feel free to look at other upcoming events, both boardrooms, webinars, panel moderated webinars, and full-day virtual events at campitsince1984.com. We hope that everyone stays safe, stays healthy, and hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll see you all in person. Thank you, gentlemen. Looking forward to working with you in the future.
Thanks all. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Bye all.